Imagine sitting in an upstairs room. It's completely enveloped in this thick, hazy cloud of cigarette smoke.
Oh, yeah, you can almost smell it just from the description.
Right, exactly. And you are lounging on these beautiful, intricately woven Persian carpets. You're arguing passionately about French philosophy, sipping drinks, maybe listening to someone lazily plucking a guitar.
It sounds incredibly idyllic.
It really does. I mean, you feel sophisticated, you feel safe, but right outside your window, the entire foundation of your country is quietly, irreversibly collapsing.
And that contrast is just so striking.
It is. And today, we are stepping directly into that exact room. We're doing a deep dive into a really evocative play titled Smoke in the Upper Rooms by Farid Novin.
Based on that really detailed source post from April 2026, right?
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a pretty haunting question. Like, how does history manage to creep in and completely upend our lives while we are, totally distracted, just arguing about art and our own comfort?
It is a phenomenal premise.
Mm.
And the playwright anchors it in a very specific, highly volatile time and place.
Tehran and Isfahan, right?
Yes, spanning the late 1960s into the early 1970s. So this is an era where Iran is accelerating toward a massive society-altering revolution.
But we aren't seeing that revolution directly, which is so interesting.
Exactly. The fascinating lens Novin uses is that we aren't down in the streets with the protesters. We are entirely sequestered with the wealthy, highly educated, artistic class. They've essentially built a fortress of privilege on the second floor.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text paints of this room is doing so much heavy lifting.
It really is. It's so deliberate.
Yeah, you've got these Persian carpets, but they aren't laid out neatly. They're layered unevenly on the floor to create this vibe of what the script brilliantly calls studied carelessness.
Studied carelessness, yeah.
It's that aesthetic that actually takes a lot of money and effort to achieve. Kind of like modern tech billionaires wearing $800 plain gray t-shirts just so they look like they don't care about clothes.
That is the perfect modern equivalent. I mean, it is a highly curated rebellion. And you see it on their walls, too.
Oh, with the posters.
Yeah, they have European jazz posters and Jean-Luc Godard film posters. And for context, Godard was the face of the French New Wave cinema. So he represented the ultimate anti-bourgeois intellectual rebellion.
Right, so having his posters, along with these books in French and German, just sort of scattered around a half-eaten, drying pomegranate, it's their way of signaling to each other that they're worldly and enlightened.
Precisely. But they aren't actually doing anything.
No, not at all. Reading through their conversations, this upstairs room feels like a high-end terrarium.
Oh, a terrarium. That's good.
Or maybe a soundproof booth,
Uh.
Let's look at the actual people inside this bubble. You have Rafi, the son of a wealthy Tehran family.
Right, the Paris-educated son.
Yeah. He's charming, he's self-aware, but the text explicitly describes him as morally arrested.
Which is such a devastating characterization.
It really is.
Being morally arrested means he has the intellectual capacity to understand what is right and wrong in his society, but his development it stopped right there.
He takes no action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you have his friend, Javad. Now, Javad is sardonic, incredibly intelligent, and he carries this quiet, heavy despair because he sees through the entire charade.
I really love Javad's critique of Rafi. I mean, Rafi spent years studying in Europe, and Javad just strips away all the glamour of that.
He really goes for the jugular.
He does. He points out that Rafi essentially just traded 2 years of being bored in Tehran for 2 years of being bored in Paris.
It's a brutal call-out.
And Javad has this whole monologue where he argues that grand architecture, so think of the massive sweeping boulevards of Paris or grand monuments, is just, and I quote, hierarchy made permanent.
Hierarchy made permanent.
Yeah. He argues it's just stone purposefully built to make ordinary people feel incredibly small.
And, what's fascinating here is how they use these philosophical debates. Javad's observation about architecture is incredibly astute.
It is.
But for the men in this room, recognizing the oppressive nature of societal structures is treated as a fun intellectual exercise.
Right. It's like a parlor game for them.
Exactly. It's an evening's entertainment. They think they are actively rebelling just by having these thoughts.
But it's all completely theoretical. I mean, there is this brilliant, tiny moment that captures the mechanics of this generation perfectly.
The guitar scene.
Yes. Rafi picks up that guitar, leaning against the chair, and he plays it beautifully. He clearly has real talent and feeling, but right in the middle of the song, before it even approaches a conclusion, he just stops.
He puts it down.
He puts it down. Isn't that the ultimate metaphor for this specific brand of elite? Like,
Hmm.
they love to start things, they love to play with the aesthetics of a movement, but the moment it requires the sustained, unglamorous labor of seeing it through to the end, they abandon it.
They absolutely do. And there's a peripheral character in the room, an older artist named Sharan, who watches Rafi put the guitar down and delims a defining thesis for the group.
Oh, I know the quote you're talking about.
Yeah, Sharan says, "We learned everything from Europe, everything except restraint."
Man, that sets the baseline for this entire deep dive. They have the extreme privilege to import all the fun parts of European rebellion, the cynical philosophy, the art, the fashion, without importing any of the actual risk or discipline.
Absolutely none of the risk.
But, and this is a massive pivot in the source material, that illusion of a safe theoretical world only exists inside the upstairs room.
Right, it's incredibly fragile.
The moment we step outside, specifically to follow the women in the play, those invisible social walls suddenly become highly visible, crushing barriers.
And the playwright forces us out of the theoretical and into the practical by shifting the setting to a cafe in Rasht.
Right, up in the north.
Yeah, Rasht is a damp, lush city near the Caspian Sea. It was a very common getaway destination from Tehran. And it is here that we really see how the crushing weight of social currency operates, particularly for Mina.
Let's talk about Mina. Because the text notes she is usually the most lucid person in any room, which naturally makes her the most ignored.
Zably, yes.
Her storyline in Rasht is infuriating. There are these damaging rumors swirling around her regarding a prince.
Right, and this prince admired her intelligence.
But as Mina correctly identifies, his admiration wasn't a compliment, it was a demand. He expected her to be grateful for his attention.
Because of his status.
Exactly. And when she refused to play the grateful subject, the societal machinery kicked in to punish her. It generated these rumors to destroy her reputation.
Because in a patriarchal hierarchy, reputation isn't just about what people think of you at a dinner party. It is literal social and economic currency.
It dictates everything.
It dictates your safety, your mobility, your future. The prince's admiration was essentially a claim of ownership. When she rejected the ownership, the system had to diminish her value to maintain its own power structure. But what breaks Mina isn't the prince.
No, it's her brother, Hormuz.
Exactly.
Hormuz knows exactly who his sister is. He knows her character is completely spotless, but he chooses complete silence over defending her against the whispers.
He claims he's trying to protect her.
Right, he claims that, but if you look at the mechanics of what he's doing, he is just terrified of losing his own standing among his peers.
He prioritizes his comfort within the oppressive structure over his sister's actual survival within it.
Yeah.
Now, parallel to this, the playwright places another woman in the Rash Cafe, a Western traveler named Martin.
Oh, this part is so interesting.
She is stuck sitting at a table with an abysmal traveling companion named Alex, just a man who completely ignores her and talks over her.
Now, I have to admit, I struggled with this comparison during my first read.
Really? How so?
Well, when Martin tells Ismail, who we'll get to in a second, about her situation, I pushed back. I thought, isn't Martin just stuck in a toxic personal relationship?
I see.
Like, she tells this horrific story about a man forcing himself on her in Turkey, and Alex knew what was happening in the next room and did nothing. It's awful, obviously, but it felt like a bad boyfriend situation, whereas Mina is dealing with a massive systemic cultural issue. It felt like apples and oranges to me at first.
I can completely see why you'd initially read it that way. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the playwright is masterfully showing us that the underlying mechanisms are identical.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
Both women are trapped by structural cages that society likes to pretend are personal choices.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of Martin's cage, then. How is she structurally trapped?
Well, look at the logistics Martin shares. She has absolutely no independent resources.
Right, the money.
The journey, the tickets, the hotel rooms, they're all booked in Alex's name and funded by his money. She explicitly tells Ismail it's about the structure of it, being somewhere because leaving costs too much.
Oh, wow.
If she walks away from that table in Rasht, she doesn't just lose a bad companion. She loses her shelter, her legal transit, and her safety in a foreign country.
So her lack of financial capital totally mirrors Mina's loss of social capital.
Precisely.
Being somewhere because leaving costs too much, that is a brutal realization, and it completely recontextualizes Mina's confrontation with her brother.
It really does.
Because Mina understands that Hormuz's failure to speak up isn't just a passive character flaw. She delivers arguably the most powerful line in the text to him. She says, "Silence is a vote."
Silence is a vote. It is the defining rule of complicity.
Yeah.
By refusing to challenge the rumors, Hormuz is actively casting a ballot for her suppression. For these women, Javad's grand theories about Paris architecture are completely irrelevant.
Right. The hierarchy isn't made of stone here. It is made of the silence of the men around them.
Which brings us to Ismail. We really need to talk about Ismail.
Yes, because he is the key that unlocks the entire second half of this narrative. Ismail is the son of a gardener. He is not wealthy.
Not at all.
He's only in these rooms and at these cafes by invitation. He is the ultimate outsider looking in.
And because he lacks the insulation of wealth, he possesses a clarity that the others completely lack.
He sees things as they actually are.
Exactly. He understands the structural cages Martin and Mina are in because he lives in one himself based on his class.
And this clash between class, privilege, and reality comes to a boiling point when the group decides to take a trip for Nowruz.
The Persian New Year.
Right, and for those who might not know, it marks the first day of spring. It's a massive cultural event involving a lot of travel, visiting family, renewal. The group decides to travel to a grand hotel in Isfahan.
And Isfahan is a city famous for its breathtaking, historic Islamic architecture. It is a city of immense grandeur.
But getting to that grandeur requires passing through the machinery of the state.
Yes, the checkpoints.
They're taking a bus at night, and they hit a literal checkpoint. A police officer boards the bus to check papers.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because the invisible walls we just talked about in the cafe suddenly become physical barriers.
Right.
The officer walks down the aisle. He looks at Rafi, Javad, Mina, and Hormuz. He reads their expensive clothes, their relaxed posture, the sheer arrogance of their assumed safety, and he just waves them through.
He doesn't even bother them.
But then he stalks at Ismail.
The officer's radar pings immediately because Ismail doesn't have the posture of power. So the officer pulls Ismail off the bus and into this harsh, fluorescent, airless police station.
It's such a tense scene.
It is. He interrogates him, asking what his father does. And when Ismail says his father is a gardener, the subtext of the interrogation entirely shifts.
The stage is essentially asking, why is a laborer's son mixing with the elites?
Exactly. Like, you are out of your designated place.
The officer eventually lets him go, but the psychological violence is already done. Ismail is humiliated, reminded that his safety is entirely conditional.
Yeah.
And then the exact same dynamic plays out at the threshold of the Grand Hotel in Isfahan.
The contrast is just jarring. I mean, you go from a dirty police checkpoint to this lobby of marble and light, and the wealthy friends just glide right through the door.
They don't even break stride.
Right, they don't stop their conversation. They don't even acknowledge the guard standing at the entrance.
But the guard steps directly in front of Ismail.
Because Ismail doesn't know their room number. He's just tagging along as a guest.
Yeah.
And the guard uses this impenetrable circular logic of gatekeeping. Like, if you don't know your room number, you don't belong here.
He physically denies him entry.
Until Rafi realizes his friend isn't behind him. So Rafi walks back to the entrance, drops the name of a powerful family contact, and seamlessly slips the guard a bribe.
And the guard immediately steps aside.
Now, if you are Rafi, you think you just played the hero.
Oh, absolutely.
You sneaked your buddy past the velvet rope at the exclusive club. You used the system to help a friend. But later, up in the hotel room, Ismail shatters that illusion. Ismail is furious. He completely refuses to say thank you.
Because Ismail forces Rafi to actually look at the mechanics of what just happened. Rafi gets defensive, of course.
Naturally.
He tries to claim some sort of working-class solidarity by saying, "My grandfather built the first thing he built with borrowed money."
Oh, right.
He wants to pretend his wealth is just the result of hard work.
And Ismail shoots back with this incredible reality check. He says, "I know your grandfather borrowed money because my father was tending your father's garden while he told that story."
It's such a brilliant line.
Isn't it? Ismail is pointing out that Rafi didn't subvert the system down in the lobby. He utilized it. Rafi wielded the exact same corrupt hierarchical power that they all sit around complaining about in the upstairs room.
This raises an important question about the limits of their progressive ideals. And Mina actually diagnoses this perfectly while standing outside looking at the facade of the Isfahan Hotel.
What does she say, Ed?
She says, a beautiful prison is still a prison. The bars are just further apart.
Meaning, Just because the hotel is luxurious doesn't mean it isn't enforcing the exact same oppressive rules as the fluorescent police station.
Precisely. The journey to Isfahan proves that you cannot simply perform friendship across a massive class divide when one person holds an absolute monopoly on the keys to the doors.
Rafi can bribe his way out of consequences. Issa cannot.
Right. And Ismail delivers the ultimate psychological gut punch during this argument. Rafi, feeling misunderstood, yells, "I hate this country."
Oh, yeah.
And Ismail calmly corrects him. He says, "No, you don't. You hate what it makes you."
Wow. I mean, Rafi doesn't actually hate the oppression because the oppression benefits him immensely.
Yeah.
He just hates the uncomfortable guilt he feels when he's forced to acknowledge his own complicity.
And that desire to constantly avoid discomfort, to always buy his way out of consequences, finally catches up to him in the fourth movement of the play.
The collapse.
Yes, the upstairs room completely fractures because real life violently intrudes.
And the inciting incident for this collapse is that Rafi gets a young woman pregnant. And true to his morally arrested nature, his first instinct isn't to step up. It is to manage the PR.
Of course it is.
He wants to throw a pile of money at her family so the inconvenience will just quietly disappear.
It results in some of the most emotionally devastating confrontations in the text. The first is with Rafi's mother.
I had to read her scene twice because it is so incredibly cold.
It's chilling.
She walks into the room, already dressed for an event she now has to cancel because of the scandal. She demands the truth from him, but explicitly states she doesn't want the truth to understand his feelings. She just needs to know which parts of the truth their high-priced lawyer needs to use to bury the girl.
And right before she leaves, she drops this line that completely dissects his entire existence.
Let's hear it.
She says, "The thing I am most tired of in my life is cleaning up the space between what you intend and what you do."
That is the tragic flaw of the entire upstairs room summarized in one sentence. Like, they have grand, noble intentions, but their actions are entirely self-serving.
Exactly.
And Mina echoes this sentiment when she confronts Rafi next, because Rafi is spiraling, right? He's trying to justify his payoff, claiming he really does care and wants to be a good person, and Mina just cuts him off.
She does not let him off the hook.
No. She says, "You are a good person who does harm because you have never been required to stop."
Let's just sit with that for a second. Because you have never been required to stop.
Yeah.
That is the exact mechanism of unchecked privilege. When money and status constantly buffer you from the consequences of your actions, you never learn how to break.
You just keep causing collateral damage while believing you are the victim. And Mina, having seen this machinery at work, is finally done.
She makes her own exit. She abandons her brother, Hormuz, who is still pathetically begging her to care about what society whispers about her. Yeah, she tells him plainly that he is sacrificing her actual lived character just to manage his own anxiety about her reputation.
So she leaves.
She takes a teaching job in Shiraz, which is a city further south, known for poetry and a slightly different cultural rhythm, and completely removes herself from the board.
The bubble is officially popped, but the aftermath brings us to a really fascinating interaction. The husband of the young woman Rafi ruined finally arrives at the room.
This poor guy.
Yeah, this is a man who had his entire social and economic future planned out based on marrying this specific, respectable girl. He is devastated. But it isn't Rafi who speaks to him. I was actually trying to figure out why Ismail, the gardener's son, is the one who ends up explaining the reality of the situation to this broken man.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Ismail has to be the one to speak to him, because Ismail is the only one who operates in the real world.
Oh, okay.
As Ismail notes, he is less insulated. Rafi would just offer him money. Javad would offer him cynical philosophy. Ismail offers him the brutal structural truth.
Which is such a harsh pill to swallow. I mean, the husband is crying, saying his life is completely destroyed. And Ismail calmly tells him that Rafi didn't destroy his life. Rafi merely revealed the flimsy architecture it was built on.
Right.
Ismail says, "You built your life on the condition that she remain unharmed." That's not a life, that's a contract.
He breaks down the man's marriage, not as a tragedy of lost love, but as a voided business transaction.
It's so bleak.
It is. He forces the husband to see that he didn't love the girl. He loved the social arrangement her purity provided. And crucially, Ismail indicts himself in this observation.
He does.
He tells the husband that all of them in that room spent years building their identities on conditions they falsely pretended were solid foundations.
Which perfectly sets up Ishmael's final scene in the play. He is standing outside in a university courtyard talking to two younger students, and the atmosphere has shifted entirely.
The historical revolution is practically vibrating in the air around them now.
Right. One student is cynical, saying nothing will ever change. The other is zealous, saying everything is already changing. And they look to Ishmael, the guy who survived the upstairs room, for the answer.
And Ismail delivers this profound, almost exhausted reflection on everything he just witnessed with his wealthy friends. He tells the students, privilege without responsibility is not a resting place. It is a slow collapse.
A slow collapse. Wow. He realizes that Rafi, Javad, and the rest thought they opted out of history simply because they had nice furniture, imported books, and an acoustic guitar.
But they confuse the comfortable interior design of their specific room for the actual structural integrity of their society.
Exactly. They were so busy debating the aesthetics of rebellion and critiquing the architecture of Paris that they completely failed to notice the floorboards beneath their own feet were rotting away.
Which brings us to the thematic conclusion of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The personal betrayals,
Yeah.
Rafi paying off the girl, Hormuz abandoning his sister, the isolation of Ismail, none of these are just interpersonal dramas.
They're symbols.
They are micro examples of the historical reality of the revolution that is about to sweep all of them into the dustbin.
And Farid Novin makes this explicit in his playwright's note at the end of the text.
Yes, he does.
He writes that these characters aren't just empty symbols. They are real people making seemingly small, daily decisions about who to protect, when to stay silent, when to offer a bribe. And those small cowardices accumulate without anyone really noticing into the tidal wave of history.
And it is terrifying because the actual revolution is never named in the dialogue.
Never once.
It is just this looming presence. The playwright compares it to the smell of smoke in a closed room.
Like the title.
Right. At first, it's just a faint odor that you ignore. Then the air gets a little hazy and you find yourself having difficulty breathing. And then comes the sudden, heart-stopping realization that something right next to you has been burning for a very, very long time.
The narrator captures this tragic lack of awareness perfectly in the closing moments of the play. It's spoken over the sound of Rafi's unfinished guitar melody.
What's the line again?
The narrator says, "They thought the revolution would arrive like a guest, at the door, with luggage, with a time. It had been living with them for years."
It gives me chills.
So what does this all mean? It means history does not send a calendar invite. It doesn't knock politely at the front door. It slips in quietly through the vents, through the window left open for a breeze, while we are sitting on layered Persian carpets, arguing about trivial things, utterly convinced that our wealth and our intellect will protect us.
We all construct our own upstairs rooms.
Yeah.
We all have places where we retreat to philosophize, where we feel insulated and entirely safe from the messy, dangerous consequences of the world outside.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over. Throughout this deep dive, we've focused on the people ignoring the smoke in their comfortable rooms. But I want you to consider the flip side. When that smoke finally becomes fire, and you are inevitably forced to flee your comfortable upstairs room, well, what happens to the people who have been living out in the fire the entire time? When your insulation finally fails, do you suddenly expect the people you ignored to share their safe ground with you? Think about that the next time you decide a societal problem is just a theoretical debate.